Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Vikings Latest. I'm your host, Cole Smith, and today we're going to continue to talk about the NFL draft because we are less than 1 week away from the first round concluding. We'll finally have our newest member of the Minnesota Vikings to talk about this time next week. I cannot wait. Hopefully, Rob Brzezinski, interim GM, gives us something to celebrate, and we don't have to wonder if we're just continuing what Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah had been doing the past 4 seasons. But first, let's start talking about Dylan Thieneman, the player who has been mocked to the Vikings more than anybody else this draft season. Tony Pauline of Essentially Sports reported that the word within the league is that Thieneman is expected to go either 18 to the Vikings or 19 to the Panthers. Like I said, if you look at any mock drafts recently, Thieneman has been going to the Vikings in almost every one of them. It's almost getting to the point where people are just having the Vikings take somebody else just to change it up because it is like almost every other one since the combine. Thieneman, it looks like he could be a potential Harrison Smith replacement, and Smith's future is obviously up in the air. We still don't know if he's going to return for a 15th season, and even if he returns for a 15th season, you need to start planning for a life after Harrison Smith. Josh Metellus, he kind of had an off year in 2025 as well. Kind of need to shore up that safety position, whether Harrison Smith returns or not. So I still am on the record saying I'm not a huge Dylan Thieneman fan, just from what I saw in the couple of games that I watched on film. But I do know that his grades have been really good. Lines up all over the field. Even though one of the games that I wasn't a big fan of against Penn State, I thought he looked very shaky in tackling, taking angles. I think he got run over on one play at the goal line, and the whole entire tape I was watching, I was like, man, I don't know if this guy actually should be on the Vikings radar. And they ended up with a game-sealing interception in overtime. I was like, well, there it is. Maybe I'm just overthinking this a little bit too much. Maybe I'm falling into the trap of I keep seeing Thieneman. I was trying to give myself any reason not to believe in him. So if Brian Flores believes in him, then I believe that there is obviously a path for him to succeed and flourish on the Vikings defense. I'd still rather have Emmanuel McNeil Warren, Toledo safety, if the Vikings were to go safety. Safety still isn't a premium position, though. I'd still rather go Avion Terrell, Clemson corner, but it sounds like the Vikings aren't going to be going after a corner in the first 2 rounds, which I think is a bit unfortunate. But it sounds like Brian Flores is comfortable with Isaiah Rodgers, uh, Byron Murphy Jr., and James Pierre. Even last year, only Rodgers and Murphy played over 200 defensive snaps for the Vikings as cornerbacks. No other cornerback exceeded 200 snaps, which is kind of bonkers. But I don't like that for a lot of reasons. Mostly because it just leaves the cornerback room thin. If we see what happens when any position group gets thin, and especially at corner, teams can start really taking advantage of that. But anyway, it still looks like it's going to be Thieneman. Even Paul Allen, voice of the Vikings, thinks it's going to be Thieneman. And he said even up until the day of the draft, he believes Thieneman is the pick for the Vikings. So we should be ready for it. Like I said, every other mock draft has it, and even Tony Pauline said word within the league is that the Vikings or Panthers will wind up with Thieneman, which kind of tracks with everything else that we have seen recently. Now, what if the Vikings get really crazy and they try trading up instead of staying pat at 18? Well, there's a mock draft from Tom Fornelli from CBS Sports where the Vikings trade into the top 10, trade a pick 9 with the Chiefs to take Notre Dame stud running back Jeremiah Love. Now, I really want the Vikings to get Jeremiah Love, but I'm like more hoping that we see like a Randy Moss like draft fall. Not that Jeremiah Love has the off-field baggage that Moss had coming out of college, but I'd rather see Love like fall to at least like the early to mid teens before the Vikings try trading up because I just don't want to trade up, give up too many assets to acquire a running back. Much like safety isn't a premium position, running back, as we know in today's pass happy NFL, isn't considered what it used to be. Isn't valued quite the same way that it used to be. However, Jeremiah Love is one of the top prospects in this draft. He could be a very special running back. He might skew the evaluation, traditional draft thinking a little bit. So in this scenario, the Vikings trade up to pick 9. Unfortunately, this mock draft doesn't actually show trade details. However, I tried looking at some trade charts and trying to do the math. The Fitzgerald Spielberg trade value chart is out there, and that kind of puts points to each draft slot. So, like pick 9 on that chart is worth 1,887 points. Pick 18, where the Vikings sit at, is worth 1,535 points. So the Vikings are looking at about 352 points that they'd have to make up in a trade. One pick that they could throw into the trade is pick 196 in the 6th round. That's worth 325 points. With pick 18, that gets the Vikings to about 1,860 points. A little shy. Maybe they'd have to throw in like a late pick from 2027 or something to make it happen. Or maybe the Chiefs just try to really screw the Vikings. The Chiefs do have leverage here to move down after they signed Kenneth Walker. They just really don't need a running back. Maybe the Vikings potentially look at trading Jonathan Grenard. We still haven't had any resolution to that whole contract dispute. The Vikings could free up a lot of cap space. Grenard isn't owed any money in 2026, like no guaranteed money is left on his contract. This might require, something to be done in the days leading up to the draft. Because what I've heard is that one of the main reasons that Grenard hasn't been traded yet, outside of the fact that the Vikings don't really, really want to trade him. But if they were to look to trade him, Grenard is going to want to sign a new contract with whoever signs him. And the other teams, they just aren't finding any middle ground, aren't able to find a good contract to agree on with Grenard. So that's complicating the trade. So for something like this to happen, a contract would almost have to already be in place, ready to sign for the Chiefs if the Vikings were to do something like this. I still would rather keep Grenard because Grenard is a locker room leader. At his best, he's maybe the best defender on the entire Vikings defense. Last year, he only had 3 sacks, but the advanced metrics showed he was still a terror. He just missed too many sacks where he had the quarterback in his grasp. It was really weird, and I know he was very frustrated. Obviously, his season also ended with shoulder surgery. So hopefully him just being back and healthy can get him back into his Pro Bowl form from 2024. But if they can't agree to a contract, might not be the worst thing to trade up. Maybe throw that in for a trade up with Jeremiah Love in an offense that is hopefully looking to be more balanced this year. And people say you can't get Jeremiah Love because Kevin O'Connell doesn't like to run the ball. Well, we hired Frank Smith, who is the offensive coordinator for the Dolphins the past 4 years with Mike McDaniel. He's the assistant head coach for the Vikings now. Hopefully he's able to implement some ideas that kind of mesh Kevin O'Connell's philosophy with Mike McDaniel's philosophy, kind of have a more balanced attack. Vikings also went 5-0 to end the season in 2025 by leaning into the run more. They ran more than they passed in 4 of the 5 games. And honestly, you have somebody like Jeremiah Love at running back, it might make you want to run the ball. It'll be very hard to just forget to use a guy like that. At least I'd hope so. I'd hope that the team would just, lean into it. So if it were to happen, if they were to get Jeremiah Love, I'd be stoked. I don't want to give up too much, but there are ways that the Vikings could get into the top 10. And if they were to get Jeremiah Love, it would provide an immediate shift in the philosophy to this offense. So, but there is the possibility that the Vikings make a trade, but it's not for somebody in the draft. It could be for veteran defensive lineman Dexter Lawrence. He's been with the New York Giants since he was drafted in 2019, and he said that he does not want to be back with the Giants. The New York Post reported that relationship is irreparable. So Dexter Lawrence is most likely going to be on the move. What do you think about the Vikings potentially trading for him? He's still only 28. He will turn 29 in November. But at his best, Dexter Lawrence is one of the top two or three interior defensive linemen in the league. 6'4", 340 pounds, and is a force against the run, force against the pass. Vikings swung and missed on a couple veterans last year who were on the wrong side of 30, in Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen. But Dexter Lawrence is like in a class almost by himself. He's kind of in that Chris Jones sort of level of interior defensive lineman. So, do you think the Vikings could trade up or trade and acquire Dexter Lawrence? Draft compensation wise, they probably could make it work. The comp trade that people have been talking about comparing him to would be when the Giants traded Leonard Williams a couple years ago to the Seahawks. The Seahawks were able to acquire him for a 2024 second round pick and a 2025 fifth round pick. The Vikings have that kind of draft capital. They can move on from 49 if they wanted this year, and maybe even throw in a fourth or fifth next year to acquire Lawrence. Now, the issue is his money, his contract. Like Jonathan Grenard, he's going to want to get a new contract if he gets traded. And there hasn't been much resolution to his trade talks for several years. And the Vikings probably have to make the money work to convince Lawrence to come to Minnesota. Well, right now, the Vikings only have about $4.8 million in cap space, and Dexter Lawrence's cap number for the 2026 season is $27 million. There are ways to make the cap work. We've seen it before. We always hear that the salary cap is a myth. Vikings still have Rob Brzezinski, even if he does end up being the permanent general manager. He's always been a cap magician for the Vikings since he's been with the team in 1999. I'm sure he can maneuver the money around to make this work if the Vikings so desired. I just kind of have a feeling the Vikings just kind of steer clear of this one, try to build, this team through the draft because, they're kind of in a salary cap strain right now because of going after veterans. So many veterans, overpriced veterans over the past few years. They already sunk a lot of money into the defensive line last year, and it didn't work out. I know that Dexter Lawrence is far superior to Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. I just don't know about this. I think the Vikings should just stick and pick, get a defensive lineman in the draft. They could trade back and find a lot of good value from first round pick. Like they could trade down in the first round, get Cade McDonald, Ohio State defensive lineman. They could trade way down, like we said the other day on Wednesday's episode, get Lee Hunter out of Texas Tech or Christian Miller from Georgia if they were to trade into the 30s or something. I think that the Vikings need to kind of reevaluate how they want to do things. And we already saw what Javon Hargrave, his agent, said where he said Brian Flores doesn't want defensive linemen who rush the passer. I don't know if the Vikings consider Dexter Lawrence somebody who would kind of go rogue and not really mesh with the rest of the defense. Flores he tries to emphasize teamwork, everybody working as a unit. Everybody has a responsibility. Sometimes defensive linemen, they're just there to create havoc and kind of sacrifice themselves to free up a rushing lane for somebody like Eric Wilson or Blake Cashman, somebody like that. Would Dexter Lawrence be down for that, or is Dexter Lawrence so good that Brian Flores wouldn't care? I think that this just makes a little, this sounds really good if this were Madden. In real life, I think the Vikings just hold on to their picks and they try to just draft and develop, try to get salary cap compliant, and, hold on to their draft capital. Don't get too desperate. You got 4 of the top 97 picks in the draft. Hold on to them, draft, develop, stay young, and protect the salary cap for next year. Final thing today, the Vikings have been linked to a private workout with former Elon punter Jeff Yerk. He is the FCS all-time leader in yards per punt, and he was first-team FCS All-American in his time at Elon. Like I said, private workout. This would be competition for the punter position. The Vikings lost Ryan Wright, who had been their punter for the past 4 seasons, to the Saints in free agency. So they do kind of have a potential competition at punter. They did sign Johnny Hecker last month. But Hecker is 36 years old. He's a little older. He's not quite the punter he was back when he was an all-pro back with the Rams back in the day. But Yerk could provide a young leg if he's able to show that he can hold, because punters, they're third part of that whole entire field goal operation. And Ryan Wright was a phenomenal holder. So Yerk would have to prove that he can be part of that operation with long snapper Andrew DePaula and kicker Will Reichard. If he can show he can do that and he can punt consistently, he actually might have a chance at winning the job. Now, obviously, he has to get drafted or signed first, but if he were to be brought in, he might have a chance. Vikings had a punter competition in 2022 when Ryan Wright came in as an undrafted free agent. He won the job from Jordan Berry. And I was at training camp for that competition, not specifically for that competition. I'm not that psychotic. But I was there for that, and I actually didn't think Ryan Wright was holding super well, but he ended up improving, becoming really good. And Greg Joseph, he was an inconsistent kicker, but holds weren't an issue in those first couple of years with Ryan Wright, and then he ended up having a great rapport over the past 2 years with Will Reichard. So Yerk would have to prove that he could do that, and then he just have to show off that he can consistently punt the ball deep where the Vikings want it, where Matt Daniels wants him. He also is 2 of 3 passing in his career on fake punts, and the Vikings would like to run more fake punts, I assume. Johnny Hecker used to be the master at it. Ryan Wright, he completed one pass for a first down a couple years ago in 2022 against the Jets in London. Vikings haven't really done that too much since then. I think the last time they tried the fake punt was against the Colts in that epic comeback in 2022. So Yerk does have a little experience doing that. So that's all I got for today, guys. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Like I said, like, subscribe. I can't wait to talk about the draft. It's coming up next week. Cannot wait to finally have some new blood for the Vikings. And hopefully we improve this team and we can return to the playoffs this year. Thank you for tuning in, guys. Have a good weekend. Let's Skol.